point and sharing my screen. Okay, so just like Kongzi had important disciples, Lao Tzu did as well, the most significant of which was Zhuangzi. And so he not only, like I already alluded to, is going to expand upon the primary teachings of Lao Tzu, but he's also going to give us some of the aspects of Daoism that are the most memorable, such as the famous dream of being a butterfly. I'll actually pause it here for a second. So there's an interesting sort of analog to Western philosophy here that I believe the book mentions. So in Western philosophy, when we're studying epistemology, right? So again, theories of knowledge, often you will learn about Descartes and the dream argument, or the evil demon argument. Have any of you heard of these before? Sound at all familiar? No? So Descartes' dream argument is actually the somewhat behind the motivation for things like the Matrix. Okay, so the reason why we have stories like this is because of thought experiments like Descartes or like Zhuangzi's, who came much earlier, of course, and who no one gives credit to. But so we're going to start with Descartes' argument, then we'll get to Zhuangzi. So Descartes starts off, and the idea is he's trying to figure out something that we can know beyond a doubt, right? So he wants a just clear and distinct idea beyond a reasonable doubt. Sounds like the court of law, but we cannot doubt it. He says it should be indubitable. And so in order to arrive at this, he says, okay, I'm just going to question everything and then see what's left over, right? See what can't be questioned. And so he comes up with this sort of formula to question everything that he thinks he knows. And so the second of these challenges is the very famous dream argument, which is you merely ask yourself, how do you know that what you are experiencing right now, right in this moment, everything that your body and mind are experiencing, how do you know that it is not a dream? How do you know that you are awake right now? What do you think? Can you answer this question? Brain function. How do you know your brain is functioning? Are you measuring your delta and alpha waves right now? No. But even if you were, couldn't you be dreaming that you were? Right? So the idea is like whatever test you want to use to prove that you're awake, you could just be dreaming that test, right? So there's still a lot of debate about this, and there haven't been great responses to it. It's that sort of problematic. But the basic idea is that even though, yeah, like on a superficial level, like we can tell the difference between when we're dreaming and when we're awake, you can't actually prove it. You cannot prove that you are not dreaming right now. You cannot prove that this is real and that, you know, you can't even prove that other minds exist, right? Because all of that could just be part of the dream. So this is where we get things like the Matrix or brain in a vat type scenarios, right? How do you know that you're just not a brain floating in a vat of liquid hooked up to a bunch of, you know, microbes that stimulate the brain and just cause it to have these visions, right? So again, how do you know you're not in the Matrix? How do you know this is real? How do you know this is really happening to you? And the point is that we don't. We don't have that sort of knowledge. So again, Descartes gets the big props for this, but the earlier version comes from Zhuangzi, who very famously says, after having a dream one night about being a butterfly, he wakes up and he says, well, how do I know that that was a dream of me being butterfly, and right now I'm not just a butterfly dreaming of being a man, right? Like when he's awake, he's just the butterfly sleeping. And, you know, there's a lot of people who think, you know, regardless of what you think about dreams, you know, there's a lot to be said about what goes on in the mind when we're sleeping and what can be done consciously in our dreams, right? So if any of you are lucid dreamers, right, if you've ever been able to tell yourself that you were dreaming, right? And change things. It's really hard to do though, right? So, I mean, there are all sorts of other things, like some people say you can't see your hands in a dream or something like this, right? So there might be ways, but the idea is, again, well, it's theoretically possible, I guess, to dream about your hands. So I could just be dreaming about my hands right now, right? And all these types of things. I can't really prove to you that I'm not dreaming right now, right? You all could just be part of the matrix, right? NPCs. Just, yeah, exactly. That I don't know who's really out there, right? So there are other versions of this that lead to interesting epistemological ideas known as idealism, right? The idea that what our mind perceives is the only thing that's real. So you'll get famous thought experiments like, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound, right? These types of ideas stem from this skepticism, right? The skepticism, which is deeply embedded in the Daoist tradition. So just a little bit of a background there on where these ideas come from, the influence that they have on major pop culture even today. And they're still really difficult to resolve, right? It's really difficult to prove to someone what is real and what isn't. This is part of why it's so difficult to treat people who have perhaps certain diagnoses like schizophrenia, right? Paranoid schizophrenia or things like this. Like, there's no way, their system of belief is so consistent, actually, and corresponds and overlaps so much with elements that are real. It's really difficult to prove to someone that it's not, because everything could just be built into the conspiracy, right? And you could just add all that to the illusion. All right, so a little bit more about the bio of Zhuangzi here for those who are interested. But again, the fact that we're really interested in is that he's developing Lao Tzu's concepts, those 3 primary teachings, and expanding them into 7 primary teachings. Okay, so the text here is not a different name. So that's something that we've seen a lot in the previous traditions thus far, is that the texts, of Kongzi or Confucius were the analects. Lao Tzu's text was called the Daoism. Now we're going to start to see a tradition where the texts are named after the figures, right? So Zhuangzi's text is just called the Zhuangzi. So no more cool names of texts, right? But at least it's just named after the person. So here again, like the other texts that we've seen throughout history, there is some debate about who wrote which parts came from perhaps disciples or other significant figures that could have overlapped with Zhuangzi, right? So there's a little bit of a breakdown there if you're interested in that. But here, right, we're going to focus a little bit on some big differences in their teachings. Sorry, not too big a difference, actually. These are the minor differences. And then I want to focus on the big differences. So I don't think we'll get through, I think we'll save the big differences for Thursday. So since we only have 7 minutes left, and we'll just go through the little differences today. All right, so comparing Lao Tzu to Zhuangzi, right? They had different conceptions of time, which I think is rather interesting, right? Because this notion of time and space is going to be related to the Tao, of course, but they did have differences as interpretations of what that meant. So according to Lao Tzu, the future, right? Anything from the present forward is infinite. However, Lao Tzu did not think that the past was infinite, which suggests a linear conception of time, right? So something that has a starting point, right? And then goes off in one direction infinitely. But Zhuangzi didn't find this to be consistent with a truly infinite Tao, right? If the Tao is truly infinite, then time should be more circular, right? There shouldn't ever be a beginning or an end. Time should just be as infinite as the Tao itself, right? So some interesting different implications there. What I really love about circular conceptions of time that prop up or that come up in Eastern philosophical traditions is that they're super consistent with what we're learning about modern quantum mechanics, right? And yeah, just again, if we're willing to break away from this duality that we're so, insistent upon in the West, things have a beginning and have to have an end, right? There's maybe something to an infinite constantly occurring, right? Maybe there have been multiple Big Bangs, right? Or if you accept something like string theory or multiverse theory, right? That there are many different universes that, and again, nothing is created nor destroyed, right? That energy is just transferred. So lots of cool things that can be consistent there, that maybe we don't get from the history of Western philosophers, right? Who have influenced philosophy of science. Similarly here, right, a little bit of a difference in terms of practical implementation, right? So again, if the focus is to alleviate the chaos and disharmony in society, Lao Tzu took an approach similar to Kongzi in terms of focusing on, right, their impact. Whereas Zhuangzi thought that no, like, why should just the government be the people who we focus on, right? Every single person in every single part of their lives needs to be focusing on living in accordance with the Tao, right? Not just because we don't want them to be, right? We don't want the average people to be taking their lessons from those in charge, right? We're not supposed to be looking to teachers and texts. We're supposed to be going with our spontaneous intuition. So it's not just enough to teach the rulers that, right? We have to just go directly to the people. Everyone needs to learn this. So here we have also a different sort of emphasis on aspects of the Tao in terms of knowledge, right? Lao Tzu was much more heavy on this, like, more universal skepticism, right? Not entirely, but just the fact that the Tao itself is indescribable and unknowable. Whereas Zhuangzi is going to take more of an opportunity to focus on what we can learn from those instances, right? Okay, yes, we can't know absolute truths about the Tao, but we are supposed to be able to identify through our spontaneous intuition manifestations of things that are in accordance with the Tao. So let's focus on that and what we can learn from that, right? And so in terms of other different emphases, Lao Tzu focused on the preservation of life, right? Which is maybe why we see more of the religious Daoism come out of that element of his teachings, where Zhuangzi focuses more on overcoming a fear of death, so actually being more okay with it. So you're going to see a lot of teachings from the Zhuangzi are going to emphasize, like, sort of a celebration of life when someone passes, as opposed to mourning their death. It's going to involve things like not opting to try to cure a disease, right? But accepting that nature has given it to you, right? So yeah, very different emphases are going to occur there. Also in terms of, you know, which aspects of life are open to cultivating virtue. So we're going to see more of an opportunity for artistic expression, according to the Zhuangzi, than in the Lao Tzu. So just a little bit here of their differences. But again, the primary thing is going to be on this focus of knowledge. Once again, Lao Tzu very much is focusing on what cannot be learned from teachers, what cannot be learned from language, what cannot be learned from the texts. So here again, Zhuangzi is going to say, well, what can we learn from experience? And so this is where we're going to start off on Thursday. So there's not a lot of slides left, and the majority of them are going to involve these parables. 1, 2, 3, only 3? Nope, that's supposed to be 4. And then parable 4. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to read at least one of these parables. They're short, okay, before Thursday, because each of these parables are meant to teach us one or more of the 7 lessons, okay? So they're going to focus on, again, how we gain knowledge, or what types of knowledge we can gain. So that's what we're going to do on Thursday. So my request for you before class is please read just one of these. All right, so again, there's 4. I need to figure out how to change that number. Here we go. Okay, so 4 stories, pick one and read it, and we'll share our thoughts on Thursday. Okay, so I'll hang out for anyone who has any questions. Otherwise, I'll see you then. Have a wonderful week.